Now, we're here to talk about autism, the autism strategy, and some of the issues faced by the autistic community. In terms of the strategy itself, I know we made quite a bit of headway with the strategy with it going through Tin World and it being launched or ready to launch.
I can remember the strategy being launched. I think it was sometime in early March. And it was available. It is available on the government website. There's two forms. There's an easy read form and there's a full form. I tend to use the easy read form because it's easy to point out to things to people. But I would recommend anybody who's got any association with autism, either for themselves or somebody they care for, actually goes and has a look at the autism strategy on the government website.
As someone that is autistic, what do you make of the strategy?
The strategy in itself, I think, is very, very good. It seems to cover a lot of the points. I was at one of the launch meetings, and the autism strategy oversight group seemed to want to listen to the autistic community and find out what the autistic community really needs from the strategy, which I thought was one of the most positive interactions I've ever had.
You're a mum and you've got kids with autism.
Yeah.
What did you make of the strategy? You know, when they first announced that they would be looking at an autistic strategy and then, going through the process and then it coming to the end, where it's ready to launch. Reading it, going through that process, how was it for you?
I think at the beginning, you're always a bit sceptical of people who don't understand my world, having opinions or thoughts about my world. But if you don't engage with it, there's no hope for change. And so I went to the strategy meetings and got invited to things, and our input was listened to. And it was a good year, 2 years that we were talking to people. I was really impressed with the questions that were asked. There were people who understood autism, who lived with people that they love who have autism, and there seemed to be a lot of understanding about the journey that autistic people have to do to live in our society. So I was actually really impressed, and by the time we got to launching it, I personally felt that we had been heard, and the strategy showed that we had been heard.
Did you also have similar feelings to that, being someone who is autistic, the struggles that you've been through, did you feel as though, right, this is, people will understand me now?
Yes, the strategy seemed to be a serious attempt to make the island more autism friendly. Certain bits of it are, certain bits of it aren't. Even the government that's owned up and said, yes, we are not autism friendly in a lot of ways. And they made commitments during this strategy to actually address those, to make dealing with government to be a much easier process for autistic people.
Now, you've faced some of those issues. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, I've been receiving one-to-one autism support from autism initiatives for the last 3 years. I had a very good support worker who helped me in a lot of very practical ways to deconstruct problems so that we could look for solutions for little bits rather than trying to deal with the whole thing at once. Then, a few weeks ago, there was a meeting to which I was not invited. I received a phone call saying that my autism initiative support was being withdrawn, but without a reason.
When you got that call, what went through your mind?
I was just numb. My support has kept me out of Manannan Court on at least one occasion. And you'd have thought 1 hour a week support is better than 168 hours a week of care. I felt lost. I felt...
Yeah, he just needs a break now.
No problem. What have you noticed? There are some positives, but there's still some issues that needs ironing out. Have you noticed anything?
I think for me, understanding systems, you're always going to be ironing out. And I was just really impressed that they made such a good starting point where a lot of things had been thoroughly worked out. And the hope would be that as we then implement it and work with it, bits that need tweaking, the people that we spoke to seemed willing to then tweak it. So I don't think it could have been more positive, although it wasn't perfect.
But I understand, even though we have the strategy at the moment, there's still support that is needed.
Oh, there's so much support that's needed, and it's just not available. So for one of my sons who's trying to leave home at the moment, there is no support for him to live independently because he doesn't have a social worker. He would be in the learning disability teams. He was unable to access learning in his young years, couldn't attend school, was educated completely at home. His learning was delayed and is improving, but because his IQ measurement, which doesn't make sense to me, is not under 80, he cannot have any support from the learning disability team. I think somebody who has taken 5 years to learn to sign their name and who hasn't been able to access education, how on earth can people say that he doesn't have a learning disability? How on earth?
And for you as a parent, it must be difficult because you are his carer, but you also, you need that support as well for yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I find it hard being called a carer. I love this person who is struggling to access his life. And I know the amazing qualities he's got and that he can bring to the world. And they're like false gateways are stopping him. And it bemuses me how somebody can put a silly gateway there and therefore stop him becoming fully him. He is such an asset to our family, to the people in his community around him, and it is beyond me that he can't get the support he needs to just be able to live away from home and build his life.
What would you like to see more of or be implemented? What would you like to see?
I think for me, the biggest thing, so I have a variety of children with different needs, to have the allocation of someone that they can always access all of their lives, because autism has a spiky profile. It isn't about deficit. It's about all the things you can do and then these few little things that you can't do. And throughout your life, throughout the things that life throws at you, so sickness, relationships, having kids, you will go through different experiences where you need somebody to support you to navigate that experience, because all of those experiences are designed for neurotypical people. They are not designed with an understanding of neurodiverse people.
I think the island does need, it needs an autism champion, but it also needs to have, as part of Manx Care, an autism support team. It's all very well to say, oh, we're getting support through offering support through a third party, but since the third party writes the contract, if they change the rules, then Manx Care have no comeback. I don't know, but I suspect that what has happened is that's why my care has been withdrawn.
Is it fine if I just go back to the Manx Care withdrawing the support? Is that fine?
Yeah.
Right. So as you were saying, you've lost that support. Any idea why?
No, because nobody's told me. And basically, I emailed my MHKs the head of the health service, the Autism Strategy Oversight Committee, and MCALs. I've heard nothing from my MHKs, despite the fact that I know they're back from the holidays. 9 days after I sent the email, I got an acknowledgement from the executive assistant of the head of Manx Care. The Autism Strategy Oversight Committee said, well, it's not really about us. And I replied to that, well, yes, it is. It is, because you need to know how autism is currently being dealt with in the community. MCALs, who are the only people who've really seemed to have taken this seriously, have passed it on to the Care Quality and Complaints Department, to whom I've had one meeting with a representative. At that meeting, I found out that 6 months in, the autism strategy, which was so paraded with razzmatazz when it was launched, Manx Care have not been asked to implement it. Therefore, they're not legally or on a bound to provide the support. There are 6 principles in the autism strategy, and I feel that I am being let down on 5 of them. And because it's just me, and there's all this range of experts, I feel a bit like Mr. Bates versus the post office.
And all you're doing is you're asking for that 1 hour of support, that's 60 minutes of support.
I have been allocated a mental health support worker, but she cannot give me autism support. All she can do is give me mental health support. And despite what a lot of people think, autism is not a mental health condition. No, it's a lifelong disability. And I hate to say, use that word, but it's the only word that can really express that we do see the world differently. We do react differently.
Yeah, I think there is a misunderstanding that it is a disability. I mean, it is, autism is full of abilities. There are aspects where you have to engage with society, usually the system side of society. So, for instance, when you engage with people, the people are lovely. Inside Manx Care, I had a recent experience where my son needed a CT scan, and somebody in the team was very unkind to him. I immediately told the people who run that team. They were horrified. They immediately did something about it. They helped the person get training. I couldn't be more impressed with that response. So when you're dealing with human beings have become really understanding, really accepting of autism, much more awareness. I think the strategy brought a lot more awareness of autism to people. But it's when those people are constrained by a system, you'll be told, but we have no legislation that can help you. We can't implement anything because there's nothing written in legislation for us. So I think it's a systems problem. And if people could talk to me about this system, talk to people with autism about this system, what could we do to make this more accessible to you? The journey through healthcare, the journey through education, the journey through going to work would be much, much easier. And there are lots of people on the spectrum who have something enormous to give to our community, some of which has a commercial value, so they'll be earners bringing taxes into our government, and some of which are social and community, which is invaluable to our community. And yet those people are never set free to be themselves because the systems knock them out before you can get through the door.
So just to echo what you've been saying, it's not an issue with the people. It's not an issue with the strategy itself. It's the rolling out of it
Yes.
and making it more accessible to all.
Yes, and the inquiry, so people understand some types of autism, but not everybody is non-verbal. Not every, people are high functioning, but they still live with the same constraints, the same trying to engage with a society that is not wired to understand them.
What's your message to the powers that be, the people that would be high up in government that would be listening to the interview? What would be your message to them?
You need to look at your systems and you need to be more kind. You need to know that first, an autistic person is a human being and they have feelings and they have potential and they are amazing people. But your systems reduce them. And that reduction into being a problem or having problems is a bit insulting in this age, in 2024. To reduce people to what problem are they is just horrid. We don't need to do that on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is fundamentally, I moved here 13 years ago, and the support that I had in Peel from people at the swimming pool, in the shops, just normal people got to know my family and were kind to my family. We need our systems to reflect that kindness.
I think there are certainly very, very good people who go out of their way to help people with autism. I know of some people who have, really, when I was able to work, who have gone out of their way to shape an environment where I can work successfully. Unfortunately, I've also been in work environments where people seem to have almost taken a delight in making me suffer for having autism. Now that should not be happening. The island is supposed to have freedom to flourish. Well, it's very hard to flourish if you're being pigeonholed as a certain problem, or you're being blocked from employment because you can't cope with interviews. It's very hard to flourish when even a trip to the supermarket could cause you a major meltdown. I would like to mention the sunflower lanyard, which I would urge anyone who's autistic to get hold of. That's just a way of highlighting that you have an unseen disability. Bus Vannin are pushing it. I don't know who else is, but I would recommend that anybody who goes out into situations where they feel vulnerable and they don't feel they will be fully supported, that they get the lanyard, because at least on that you can say, I have a disability. I may look normal and I may act normal, but I have a disability, and something could be a tiny little thing could just turn me from a functioning human being to a crying mess on the floor. And I can't tell you what that is. I can't tell you what to do, not to do, so you don't trigger me. All that will happen is that something in me will flip, and that's it.
If I can ask, you can tell me if you want to answer it. Do you fear that, I can see you've taken years of hard work, to get yourself where you are. Do you fear that without that support that you've been asking for, you could not go downhill, but, you could take a knock?
I think that without the support I've had in the last 3 years, I would have been in Manannan Court at least once, and probably more times. And that's what worries me about getting mental health support rather than autism-specific support. The first principle of the autism strategy is to think about each person and what they need. Well, you can't do that if you reduce people to numbers. You have to look at them as an individual, somebody who has specific needs, and you can only do that by long-term care. You can't do it in the normal mental health support of 6 to 12 weeks support. It can take that long just to build up trust with somebody. You need to know the person, and that person needs to know, the suffering person with autism needs to know and be able to build trust and have a reliable support with proper care plans. For example, if I become non-verbal, how do I access a telephone system?
The mental health support, do you want to address that as well?
Yeah. My family have been in and out of the mental health system. We had some exceptional care in CAMS, unbelievable kindness. I would say that the route often ended in needing medication, and there are other things that maybe could have been done, but there wasn't they didn't have the resources to do that. I think moving into adult mental care has been tricky because you never get a consistent psychiatrist. You're always getting locums. Each locum arrives with their opinion about what medication you should be on. And they say, oh my goodness, that tablet's terrible. Don't be on that, be on this. So then you change to that tablet. You do a little journey of 9 months to a year. Then another person comes and says, what? You shouldn't be on that in the community. You need to be on something else. It's people with autism just need the consistency of knowing this is what I'm on, this is what helps me, this is what I'm going to do. And then they want to move on with their lives.
If I could just add something about locums, it was actually a locum who diagnosed me. There's no psychiatrist within Manx Care qualified to diagnose autism.
I'm not sure that that's true. There are psychiatrists who can diagnose autism, but there is no service here. So there's no funding for neurodiversity. You know, some of my kids have got ADHD, and they cannot access care. They cannot access medication. We have to pay for that privately, hundreds of pounds a month, because there is no system for my kids who were diagnosed as children. In adult care, they cannot get medication. That has to be paid for privately. If my people were medicated correctly, their function in society would be enormous contribution. That they are permanently frustrated, that they're not functioning well because they can't access medication.
You've got your own experience with autism in the family. What kind of support would you like to see, not just for yourself, but for others who's also going through the same journey as you?
Well, I think the journey of parenting children who are different to you, and learning to understand what is just their beautifully and wonderfully made character and what is a wiring issue. More wisdom for parents who are loving people with autism, and a place where you can genuinely talk about it, but access help. I don't mean just a support group where you can all sit and say, this is really tricky. You want something where people can have the authority to make a solution.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.